In December of 1999, proclaimed author Stephen King published his memoir On Writing. It was well received by critics, winning the International Horror Guild Award and the Bram Stoker Award for Best Nonfiction Book. The memoir details his experiences as a writer throughout his life and coaches aspiring writers on the methods of writing and keeping an audience absorbed in a story. In the first part of the memoir, King confesses a number of stories throughout his life that influenced and shaped his writing, including things like the awful janitorial job he had one summer with his brother David, scrubbing the showers in girls' locker rooms at a local high school, which he says influenced him to write his first novel, Carrie. King drops the persona he has as a multi-million-dollar author and brings himself down to a common level, making the audience comfortable with him. This is very important because it allows the audience to take his writing advice later on in the memoir seriously while not also thinking he is an untouchable, pretentious author telling them what to do or say with their writing. He then advises that in order to be successful as a writer, one should have their own toolbox, which is basically a writer's identity, including things like their own vocabulary and grammar mechanics. After this brief section, he then begins the on-writing part of the memoir, in which he coaches writers on how to use their toolbox to its fullest, making their writing as good as it can be.
Taken from this memoir is an excerpt where he expresses the importance of reading in order to better your writing. If King had just jumped into these statements without revealing his experiences and, in turn, becoming a common man to the audience, his words would not mean as much, and the audience would perhaps disregard his advice under the notion that he is just bossing them around from his position of power. King also uses sarcasm and a number of alternatives to attempt to reason with the audience and to avoid the bossing around effect. Where else can you read? This rhetorical question is King setting up the alternatives and sarcasm he plans to use. There's always the treadmill, or whatever you use, down at the local health club to get aerobic. This sentence is as though King is speaking directly to the audience through the use of you. I try to spend an hour doing that every day, and I think I'd go mad without a good novel to keep me company. This sentence shows King providing evidence and personal experience to his claim that you can read and get exercise at the same time. Most exercise facilities at home as well as outside are now equipped with TVs, but TV while working out or anywhere else really is about the last thing that an aspiring writer needs. If you feel you must have the news analysis blowhards on CNN while you exercise, or the stock market blowhards on MSNBC, or the sports blowhards on ESPN, it's time for you to question how serious you really are about becoming a writer. These three allusions are King's use of sarcasm in order to lighten up his statement that TV should not be watched while trying to read. You must be prepared to do some serious turning inward toward the life of imagination, and that means, I'm afraid, that Geraldo, Keith Olbermann, and Jay Leno must go. This, like the sentence before, it does the same effect to the statement about TVs. Reading takes time, and the glass teat takes too much of it. Once weaned from the ephemeral craving for TV, most people will find that they enjoy the time they spend reading. I'd like to suggest that turning off that endlessly quacking box is apt to improve the quality of your life as well as the quality of your writing. And how much of a sacrifice are we talking about here? How many Frasier and ER reruns does it take to make One American Life complete? How many Richard Simmons infomercials? How many white boy / fat boy beltway insiders on CNN? Oh man, don't get me started. Jerry Springer, Dr. Dre, Judge Judy, Jerry Falwell, Donnie and Marie, I rest my case. In these last few sentences, King uses sarcasm in order to express that sacrificing TV is not that much of a sacrifice at all.
Throughout this entire memoir, King leads up to the actual memoir part called On Living, which only consists of the last tenth of the entire book. In this section of the book, King recalls the events leading up to, during, and after an event which leaves him in critical health. This excerpt takes place after the event, where all King is left with is pain and an unwillingness to work. I didn't want to go back to work. This statement is just a relatable one because nobody does want to go back to work. And italicizing want just makes the statement seem childish and makes it seem as if he's whining about, the situation. I was in a lot of pain, unable to bend my right knee, and restricted to a walker. Restricted is a strong word that is just showing without this walker, he can't go anywhere. I couldn't imagine sitting behind a desk for long, even in my wheelchair. The wheelchair is kind of a funny thing to add. Just sort of comic relief, I guess. Because of my cataclysmically smashed hip, sitting was torture after 40 minutes or so, impossible after an hour and a quarter. The phrase cataclysmically smashed just emphasizes how much his hip is ruined, and the statement afterwards with the exact times just shows how serious it is and how real the situation is. Added to this was the book itself, which seemed more daunting than ever. How was I supposed to write about dialogue, character, and get an agent when the most pressing thing in my world was how long until the next dose of Percocet? Using the word daunting makes it seem as if this book is just hovering over him and kind of agitating him in a way, and he also refers to it as the book, so yeah, that just adds to that daunting effect. And the last part of that sentence is King using dark comic relief in a way where it's funny because this is Percocet and he's kind of joking about that, but also just kind of dark because this is his reality right now, and this Percocet is the only thing he's concerned with. Yet, at the same time, I felt I'd reached one of those crossroad moments when you're all out of choices. This is relatable because everybody has had one of those moments, and using your brings the audience into their own head to think about that moment that they've had. And I had been in terrible situations before, which writing had helped me get over, had helped me forget myself for at least a little while. Perhaps it would help me again. It seemed ridiculous to think it might be so, given the level of my pain and physical incapacitation, but there was that voice in the back of my mind, both patient and implacable, telling me that, in the words of the Chambers Brothers, time has come today. That voice is also relatable to the audience, and the allusion to the Chambers Brothers brings that song into the audience's head, giving them a joyous and happy feeling. It's possible for me to disobey that voice, but very difficult to disbelieve it. The alliteration between the two words disobey and disbelieve in this last sentence emphasize those words even more. This excerpt best exemplifies King's purpose in displaying the importance writing has in his life. One quote from the book serves as reassurance to this statement, where King says, "Writing is not life, but I think that sometimes it can be a way back to life." In this case, King has been brought back to life mentally through his writing, and it has allowed him to continue on living his life.